the best new slash rookie slash up and coming esports color commentator of the last 2 to 3 years, currently has no top tier league in her game to work in. I'm referring, of course, to Froskurinn, famous for doing LPL English broadcast in recent years, basically in 2014, and she came around in 2014. That's when she first came onto the scene, and so I'll kind of describe kind of my initial thoughts and initial exposure, and then unfold why this is significant that this person doesn't actually have even a top tier place to do commentary from and ply their trade. Because the first exposure I had to Froskurinn was actually when I watched the LPL Spring Playoff Final in 2014. So it was between EDG and IG, and I'd kept track. I usually keep track of some of the other leagues that I wasn't that interested in, just when the playoffs comes around, and I keep track during the season of like who's where in the whereabouts in the league and who are likely to be there. And so the way the regular season had gone, the expectation had been that EDG, which was this team that had gotten Nami from Positive Energy from the year before, and they've gotten the jungler and the support player from World Elite, and the coach of World Elite, and they'd made this new team trying to make this super team. But during the regular season, they hadn't been like dominant. They'd been this super late game style. Meanwhile, OMG were the dominant team from the year before. They'd been the best team of 2013. So they were actually the top of the regular season for most of the time. So it was expected, okay, these two teams will meet in the final. So when the final came around, it actually ended up being EDG versus IG, Invictus Gaming, who were the ultimate like underdogs, the ultimate to upset you, because they had those players that we all know, like Zitai, PDD, these sorts of players who could upset you, and they did. They upset them. So this final took place, and I watched it, and the actual series wasn't such a great series. It was just EDG stomping and being incredibly dominant, and crucially in the series, Nami was an absolute monster. He just was essentially almost perfect and just completely dominated the opponents. So this was the first breakout if you were a Westerner for Nami and you hadn't watched much Chinese LoL. But what's interesting is I watched the game, thinking I'm coming in to watch EDG and I'm coming to see how good Nami is and all the rest of it, so I can start to get interested and look into it. But the actual thing I took away from the game that was most significant was, who is this female commentator who's doing these games? Bearing in mind, I knew that it was kind of like a low tech community grassroots effort doing the commentary for it, and that they had a rotating cast of people, and I didn't know any of the people, any of the names. I thought to myself, I'm not going to have much expectations here. I've seen what it's like when just fans do things, and people who maybe have some knowledge, but they probably won't have many good delivery skills, or they won't know how to structure what they're doing. And what I found was the person doing this color commentary, everything about it was impressive. The knowledge base was really solid and really deep, and went even into areas of like past things that they could recall that I'd researched myself for articles. Delivery was absolutely spot on, totally on point. It was very smooth. It flowed. There wasn't any awkward pauses. It went from one thing to another. It weaved from this into the next thing, into cutting into some action that was happening here, and then back into a point that made sense. And there was a coherency and a kind of consistent layering of the information. So it could go to deep levels and go deeper than that. If you didn't know what player she was talking about or the history of it, you could just stay on another level below, but understand that there was something she was alluding to. It was working really well. In terms of synergy, the synergy with the co-caster, who actually, I can't remember his name, but it wasn't any of the guys everyone remembers now. It was kind of an awkward guy. He was having his problems, but the synergy between Froskurinn and this person was very good. It was on point. It actually sounded quite smooth. In terms of her tone, depending on the speed she had to talk at or what type of information she was delivering to the audience, the tone would shift, and this it had all the hallmarks actually of a veteran commentator who's in their element and actually has mastered different elements of the craft. And yet this is a person I've never heard of, I had no exposure to whatsoever. I'd never even heard mentioned in the community, and I follow a lot of the things in the community and try and keep my like finger on the pulse of what's going on in here and there and who's doing the different things around the scenes. So I knew who some of the GPL casters were. I knew the old LPL casters. I remember people raving about Papa Smithy and Pastry Time and enjoying these guys and getting into Papa Smithy's stuff and watching the old stuff that he used to do with OMG, etc. And yet I'd never heard anything said about this caster. In fact, after that particular cast, I went away and I Googled and I looked on Twitter and I searched Reddit, and eventually I was able to find out, right, this is the person I'm looking for is someone called Froskurinn. And I already knew a bit about Kelsey Moser anyway from her writing there, and so there's a connection between the two. And I found this person and I started to promote them a little bit and started to watch more of their stuff and listen to what they said on Twitter, and just in general start to try to find out more about this person behind it. And like I'm saying, with all these qualities there, this wasn't just a one-off actually. It turned out when I went back and watched other casts, it was the same thing. And even more so actually, the synergy aspect that I mentioned was even more impressive, because now the synergy was with all these rotating different casters that she would work with that season and the next one. her synergy with them all was always very good. Sometimes they'd have other different people and she wouldn't be doing a game. And actually, yeah, sometimes it'd be off then, or people would be talking at the wrong time and there'd be silence at the wrong time, or someone would have good points but they couldn't make the point properly, or they stumbled over trying to make a point, or they made half a point and didn't get there. When she was involved in the cast, it would go really smoothly. She would make sure that things worked. She would kind of adapt what she was doing to the other person. So the whole thing was just working great. And that's the thing. Beyond just the casting of LPL English, then they were doing this talk show, China Talk, which if you like Summoning Insight, admittedly, maybe it doesn't have the personalities that people in the West are drawn to. That is part of what Summoning Insight is. It's not just the comments that Monty has or the insights. It's the fact that it's Monte Cristo and it's me and it's guests, etc. And obviously, we have the luxury of being particular personalities that people like or dislike in a certain way where they'd want to watch and they're interested by it. Whereas China Talk, unfortunately, has never fully been able to, I think, develop that aspect. A lot of the people involved in it, you have to realize, are a lot newer to the scene, and maybe they themselves haven't decided what personality they want to present or got a clear picture in mind, whereas me and Monty kind of do have an idea of what our personalities are like and how they're going to interact and what our roles will be. So I understand that. But even so, the information on China was really interesting. So now I found out that, okay, this Froskurinn person can not only do all the casting, but she can hold a conversation, she can direct conversation, she has jokes sometimes. I will say sometimes some of the jokes were maybe a bit too meta. Admittedly, it is a show basically for these friends and people like that and a few hardcore people. It's not like it's got thousands and thousands of people. It was servicing every single episode, especially back then. So I can understand why it was very self-referential and it was like an in-crowd sort of thing, because it was for the people who like that sort of thing. So that makes sense. But I also noticed from seeing how deep this knowledge went and the different was I quickly realized, like, actually this person's like interested in beyond just the games they're doing now. It's not like they're just doing this like, oh, my only gig, my only option in esports is, I guess the Chinese gig's open, I'll go and do that. It's like, actually this person's really into China. They've got a deep obsession with it. They've got a love for it that goes in it, a passion in terms of researching things and trying to get hold of like people who translate things from Chinese so that it can understand like what someone said in an interview, or why does this player think that, or what did they think of this new player they've got in a team, or why did they kick this old guy. Get all this information that otherwise you'd just be left to speculate with, or you'd say, oh, I wonder why, I guess we'll never know in the West. These people were tracking down, and Froskurinn was one of these people, so I was like, wow, this person's really into Chinese LoL. Like, if Chinese LoL can get big, this is going to be one of the people involved in it. And that's the problem. Now, the LPL broadcast is now being done in a studio. It's now being, in theory, done on a higher production level. We're now in a world where now Froskurinn could shine. She could become an elite caster in the world. So that at the end of 2015, in an ideal world, the best commentators, color commentators in League of Legends would be Monte Cristo for Korea, they would be Jatt for NA, and they'd be Froskurinn for China. And there we go. We'd have 3 of the biggest regions covered with experts who are totally keyed into their region, with experience, with a history, with a lot of knowledge built up, with all the latest knowledge, with all the skills and tools, the toolkit to be able to deliver this to the audience and weave it in with talent and skill. We'd have all these qualities, and we'd have a brilliant section. You know what? Worlds would come up. We'd have all the right people on the desk. We'd have all the major regions represented. What a great world it would be in. Except that's not the world we live in. That's not the world we're going to live in, because the new broadcast is being set up, and for whatever reasons, Froskurinn isn't a part of it. Now, the simple way to put it is, it's quite obvious to me in terms of speculating from behind the scenes and seeing the way these things have played out, and the way, one of the key things about being in the industry in esports is you learn how to translate what a PR statement says into what is really going on there. And then when you know some things behind the scenes, you can then extrapolate that and understand that when they say one thing, it actually means this. And so from the way it's all presented, I can tell that it's nothing to do with skill. It's not to do with any of those qualities. And anyone who tells you otherwise, be suspicious of them, because they're essentially outright lying or trying to persuade you of something disingenuously, when the real reason as to why Froskurinn isn't in this position is people in the public don't like her attitude, or they perceive her a certain way. People within the industry, people within Riot and within the people who make these decisions, it would seem to me, don't particularly like the kind of bent she takes, or they'd rather she did something in a more upbeat and only see, people use words like positive here. Positive is not the case. Artificial hype, that's what they want in this sense. And they don't want you to ever refer to an elite Korean or Chinese player, but in a way that shows that he's significantly above a Western top player, etc. And to create that disparity, they want to maintain the illusion. They want the veil of all the reasons are great and they're all excellent, and oh, this is good this way. And you know what? Sometimes, as you've already seen, some of the Western casters who don't know that much about China, etc., would actually kind of slam China and throw in this, oh, it's strategically inferior, etc., in a way that they wouldn't about their own regions. So there's a whole murky kind of propaganda / PR offensive going on here in terms of the way the language and the semantics are being played with how they don't hire people, how they do, what the goals are in these senses. And it's always presented as something super positive, the way it's being done. But actually it's something that's sinister when a talent like this is not being fostered and encouraged and allowed to bloom. I'm like, wow, we've got another great esports commentator. This is going to be awesome. Let's see where this can go. Let's see where this person can be in a year or 2 years from now. And what an amazing game League of Legends will be, where we've got all these experts who are passionate about their scenes and super knowledgeable to explain to us, just the viewers who don't have time to watch 50 League of Legends games from China in a year and 50 from Korea and all the rest. When it comes to Worlds and we want to watch it at the best possible Worlds, if that's all we want to do as normal casual fans, now we've got the geniuses, the experts who can translate that information to us. Instead, one of these regions is now massively missing in that respect. And yes, some of the other people from these regions do have a history with it, like Papa Smithy's been involved for a long time. He used to be the Froskurinn essentially of that era, where he's this guy who came up and we're like, wow, who's this guy? He knows so much about Chinese LoL. But you know what? He took time off. And during some of that time, he didn't always stay watching every single game in LPL. There were times when he took time off and actually wasn't that knowledgeable. I'd sometimes ask him like some questions. He'd be at the moment, like I've been out of touch with the scene for a little while, like I'm getting back into casting, I hope in the future. Like the problem is those people, they can maybe get up to a good level again, but they're lagging behind where Froskurinn is right now. Like she's got the knowledge and she's gone further back. And so she's up to date and with the past knowledge and the connection there, whereas they're still reforging that connection. They're getting back into the scene. They're rediscovering their love for it. They're getting into all the different aspects and seeing what's different here. And now some of them are going to be good, but it's not a case of either or. We don't have to have Papa Smithy or Froskurinn. We could have both. That's the whole point. And so you go forwards, and yeah, this is the best Chinese caster, color commentator, and caster overall, because I consider color casters superior to play-by-play. So whatever, get at me. We could have that debate another day. But just say best color commentator in China by far of the people doing English language. This is someone who is the obvious candidate to be a desk analyst for the World Championship, because they have all that knowledge, they have that insight, and most crucially, they have an on-camera personality that doesn't just crumble under pressure or get worried or fail to deliver things properly, and who can adapt to other people like you have to on those broadcasts and banter with people and have jokes and still be to some degree. People can debate this, but to some degree charismatic while delivering points, because one of the things people complain about Kelsey Moser, who's an incredible mind for the game, is really knowledgeable, is great on written form. People always complain when she's on video, it's boring and I don't know. Well, that's the thing. You can't have it both ways. It can't be like, well, the person who's really charismatic, I sometimes disagree with what they say, therefore they're just arrogant and a cunt. But okay, what about the person over here who has all the information and never gives off any persona? You could dislike that. Yeah, it's boring. It's like, well, which do you want it to be? What, just some perfect cyborg that's got, like, I give it 38% humour. Oh, wait a second, tone that down, 36%. 33% knowledge, not too much. I don't want to be a know-it-all prick. Like, you got to just have some knowledge. Just don't make me feel inferior, though. You sucking the Korean/Chinese dick. Like, why does it have to always be this ridiculous scenario where people like think they can like craft the person that they're going to have? Instead, you have to accept people who have a lot of talent to some degree, if that's all you have the option of, them or just someone inferior who's nothing offensive about them, but nothing you're going to go for, which isn't, by the way, the Kelsey Moser example. I'm talking about other casters who you get plugged and played into these regions. So the point is, this is the obvious candidate. In fact, I'd go ahead and say the only candidate who right now would make sense as a desk analyst for Worlds. Now listen, maybe Papa Smithy can be in that position when Worlds comes around, because once he's had this full breadth of this season, maybe he will be in that position. But it doesn't make sense to throw away other talent when we could have both of these, or we could have one or the other, or we could have both involved in some sense. The idea that both can't be involved in LPL is a big problem. Now then, one of the other areas, and I'm going to make a specific point of this in this video, one of the other areas where I've noticed some kind of pushback against Froskurinn and almost kind of a spitefulness and a passive-aggressive tone has been from other League of Legends casters, both play-by-play and commentators. And so I'm going to drop some science on these people, because I've spent a lot of time myself studying the art of colour commentary, both in esports and in real sports. Sports I don't give a fuck about in general. In that sense, and because I've done it myself in Counter-Strike, the many, many tournaments, I've done a lot of analysis. So actually, I have more experience doing colour commentary analysis to a degree than some of these people that you might be talking about now, in terms of how many years it goes back. And I've studied it as a craft across different games as well. So it's not that I'm just like wildly speculating with no knowledge base whatsoever. So with that said, I'd also consider myself a connoisseur of commentary. I've listened to all the best commentators in StarCraft 2, Brood War, League of Legends. I've even heard some Dota, Counter-Strike obviously, Counter-Strike Go, Quake. I've heard all the great ones throughout history. I know all the qualities that make up a caster that I think is brilliant on the colour, the analysis side. First and foremost, some of these casters who are who kind of suggested as if like, oh, the real reason Froskurinn isn't hired or isn't in this position is that, like, she isn't actually good enough. Like, knowledge isn't that great, or if the knowledge is there, like the delivery, the technical skills aren't that good, or synergy isn't that good. Maybe doesn't have the experience to do that aspect. Essentially, it's nearly always arguing from the perspective that they're more popular, therefore what they say is right, and the way they do it's the right way, or that they have more experience, therefore the way they do it's better, and that they're automatically better because they've done more games and they did like season 2 stuff. It's always from this weird position. Let me just drop some science for these fools. First things first, we'll go point by point. So category number 1, knowledge base. In terms of knowledge, Froskurinn is number 1 within the Chinese region by far. Because, okay, Kelsey Moser probably has more knowledge overall, but doesn't have the other aspects that you need. So, and it doesn't bill herself as a colour commentator, by the way. So of the colour commentators who can do Chinese League of Legends now in LPL region, Froskurinn is number 1 by far. It's not like it's a debate, like there's 1, 2, and 3, and whichever you pick's the right one. No, this is number 1 by far. Yeah, Papa Smithy's great. I was a fan of his from 2013. He still has a gap to make up to get to that level again. He still has to reintegrate himself, get himself back into the scene. He's got some work ahead of him if he wants to get as good. If he wants to be where Froskurinn was, but when she was taken off the broadcast, he's got some work to do. So right now he's number 2, but there's a gap. There's a distinct gap between the two there. She's number 1 by far. Now then, go beyond just China. We'll talk about any region. Just talking, regardless of the region, what's the person's knowledge level like relative to their region? She's top 3 for sure. So the top 3 are Monte Cristo, Korea, Jat, North America, and Froskurinn, China. Now in this particular case, I actually wouldn't mind if you said any of the 3 can be the number 1. First of all, it's unlikely everyone's going to know all 3 regions, therefore they're not going to be that well versed to be able to say who's better. You all know I could say who's better, and I would, you could probably even guess what order I'd put the list in. But actually, I'll acknowledge here, if you really like NA, if you only watch Korea, you can pick your own order here. It's probably not that problem. We're talking about the 3 best, and after those 3, the other commentators, yeah, they're great. Like, listen, I'm a fan of Deficio. I like Papa Smithy. There's people who I think are really talented, who are really good at this job, and who are getting better as time goes on. But right now, those 3, Jat, Monte Cristo, Froskurinn, stand head and shoulders as the elite class of colour commentator in League of Legends above any of the others. The others, order them whatever order you want, pick whoever you want to be 4th, pick whoever you want to be 8th. None of them are close to these 3. There's still a gap there. So first and foremost, in terms of knowledge, unless you're one of those other 2 people out of the 3, shut the fuck up when it comes to knowledge. You're not better. I don't care how many games you used to cast that used to be Go for Alls. You're not better. Your knowledge is not even close to as good relative to your region, even as it is for hers. And her region, by the way, is probably better than your region. So that's part 1. Secondly, you could go all day and all night, mate. You will probably never have the knowledge base for China that she has, because even if you started now and you put all your talent and experience and all your know-how and your technical skills and processes you've built up, you could start today. And the reason why you'd never have as good knowledge about China is because maybe you could get really good about China. Maybe you're a good commentator. I agree, that's probably possible. The difference is, if she continued at the same time as you were going, you'd never overtake her, because she has all that she has before and all the extra stuff and all the above and beyond the Call of Duty stuff she's done outside of hours and talk shows and interviews and all, added to what she'd be doing at the same time you'd be trying to catch up, and she'd always maintain some distance ahead of you because of talent, experience, just ability level, and just passion and aptitude for it. Whereas odds are, if you're not into Chinese region now, you're probably not that, you would never really have that same passion, that you'd never embrace in that sense. It'd be like a job for you. You'd be doing this task as a challenge. So the knowledge thing, I think that's not even debatable. The knowledge thing, it's over. You lost there if you're another caster. Now, in terms of technical skills, here's what's really interesting. This is the one where the older guys always try to pick up on the new ones, and they always try to sort of shit on some of the new casters, like, well, you got to pay your dues and learn your technical skills, and don't interrupt someone when they're talking, and know when to use the dead end, how to keep the flow going. Yeah, well, that's another area where I actually suspect anyone who's an old caster who's saying that Froskurinn doesn't have those technical abilities hasn't listened to her. And I'd love them to come back at me and let's have a debate. And you know what, let's have a video debate, and I'll actually bring up some examples and let's see if your eyes fucking glaze over as the audience realizes you have no clue what the fuck you're talking about. Because her technical skills are better than the majority of colour casters out there. Now, some of the ones I've referenced already are elite level guys. They are really good at this. No matter who you put them with, they're going to be on point and they're going to fill the gap that they're supposed to fill, and they're not going to talk too much, and they're not just going to cut someone off, and they're going to give the relevant information. she's close to that level. She's not quite as polished as some of the ones I'm talking about, Monty and Jat, etc. They've got years of experience. They've got the same sort of ability, talent level, but she's got years and years of experience to catch up on them or to get to a similar level. In that sense, she wouldn't have to catch up to them, because once you get to a certain threshold, it's going to be fairly negligible how much you can improve beyond that, because they're very, very good at that point. They're almost as good as you can get. So in that sense, give her a year or so and she would be at that level. Now, the people below her, she's better than a lot of them. Like, I've never seen someone who's a rookie color commentator who was this polished just off the bat. That's ability right there, and that's a mixture of ability and then honing it and putting in so much effort that you get really good really fast, and it looks like just natural skill. There's actually a saying that, like, perfect technique, I might even be making this up, but I'm sure I'm paraphrasing it somewhere, like, perfect technique is mistaken for, like, natural skill when it's that good, because it's so good and so polished. You think, oh, they must just naturally be good at that area. And I could go into a separate thing about how I've had this happen with me, where people say, oh, well, you just must be good at that. And it's actually an area where I'm like, no, I was terrible at it, mate. I spent years studying how to get a lot better and really making hard decisions to get much better. And now it looks like a natural skill, but it wasn't at all. So, okay, technical abilities, phenomenal. Delivery, pacing, tone, actually sometimes giving space just for things to happen, and then knowing to come in with the right story detail that builds into something, and you can see that the action's about to break out, and that's when you go into that aspect and let the play-by-play guy come in, and then you come back into the story and you keep the narrative going of what's going on in the thing and how this is going to relate to a potential next matchup of the next teams they'll play. All these details interwoven. That's really hard to do. I can tell you from doing color commentary myself, that's the sort of thing where if you haven't done a lot of it, it'll seem rather hit and miss. Sometimes you'll be on point with that. You'll feel like you intuitively got a sense for it. But to do it consistently, like I've seen her do it and heard her do it, is very difficult. That shows actually like a level of craftsmanship to what you're doing there. Now, in terms of synergy, I actually think this is one of the areas which would be underrated in Froskurinn, which is one of her highest and best qualities. In terms of like knowledge, yeah, I put Monty and Jack number 1, number 2. In terms of technical skills, yeah, I think those guys are very, very good. I mean, you can see where Monty's like stage training, voice training, and kind of like having done so many casts plays a role. Like, he knows when to give space and all these sorts of things. And similarly, Jack doesn't stamp all over the other guy when he's talking, and he lets the guy take over at the right moment, appropriate time. Now, in terms of synergy, though, I think Froskurinn might even be better than some of those guys, because some of those guys either haven't had to work with a lot of other casters constantly, they don't in the modern era, or they just work with the same 2 or 3 people constantly, and so they've got a really good feel for them, and maybe they can, if they work at the right age, maybe they can even spend time outside of it, get to know each other, do some practice casts. That's all great. I actually know a lot of the people who are a bit bitter towards Froskurinn don't have as good synergy as she does with some of her casters, because to me, all time in esports, the best synergy guy is Joe Miller, and he's a play-by-play, because you could put him with anyone. I've worked with him. And by the way, I worked with him. I worked with him first as a color commentator. Then I worked with all these other guys, and it's only when I worked with the other guys I realized, like, holy shit, that guy's amazing at synergy, because naturally from day one he's just like picking up and then creating space and then letting go and then kind of getting a sense for when I want to talk and what kinds of things I'm going to say and building it in there. Whereas a lot of the other guys, it would be awkward, and then they either would make me talk too much, or they'd ask me a question that I don't have time to fit in their space, or they wouldn't give me enough time, and then I'd be trying to fix something in there, and it would be like a battle. Whereas otherwise it was like a teamwork. I felt like this proper synergy between us, like we're working as a team here. She's really good at working with, you could put her with like 10 different casters, 8 of whom she'd never worked with, and very quickly she'd pick up on like which one I can work with in this way, and how can I give this one, and how can I say something so it doesn't like undermine what he said, but I can still give the correct information if my play-by-play gives a slightly inaccurate thing or something that's not in the lines of what I want to say. She's really top-notch in that level. Unfortunately, because people haven't watched a lot of Chinese LoL and they haven't seen a lot of these different combos, they're probably not going to actually know that that's a strength there. Lastly, in terms of passion, I kind of made this point before. You can't beat passion, essentially, when it's real. As in, when someone has a lot of talent and they've got a lot of time to dedicate, and then on top of it, they're just really into it. It's the thing that they like the most. Yeah, you can bring someone else in who's as good technically. You can bring someone else in who's got as much experience. But unless they also have that last quality, they're not going to put in the extra hours that you need to. They're not going to make part of researching the job be like the fun part of their hobby, of their life that's outside of the job and outside of like the company hours and the call of duty of when you should have to do it. Some of these other guys that you bring in and it's just a gig for them, they're like, oh, I've got the Chinese gig, cool, like I hope I can get good at it and do a good job for the fans, and that maybe my career goes on, and hey, you know what, maybe I get that EU job next or something. Those guys, listen, I'm not bagging on them. That's a perfectly valid way to pursue a career in esports, and it's also, I'm sure they'll do the best of their abilities within the realms of a job. as you expect, a 9 to 5. But you'll never be able to beat. It's why people who are entrepreneurs who start startups become the billionaire genius guy who changes the world, because they don't just do it like 9 to 5 and then at 5 p.m. exactly when the clock goes ding, they go, right, well, that's enough of that. I'll stop inventing this brand new computer that's going to change the whole world. They're so passionate about it. It's their whole obsession that they'll go, you know what? I'm just going to keep going until I get tired. Let's get the Jolt cans and the old pizza, maybe some like 80s references there, and let's just go all night hacking in the garage or whatever the fuck. And then they come out with the amazing product, because what they're able to bring that no one else can is they've got the talent, they've got the experience, they've got the opportunity, but then they bring this passion and this drive to do it above and beyond the Call of Duty that makes it amazing. So to me, it's ridiculous that someone who's of this sort of a talent, and a fresh talent as well, someone new who we could have, and imagine how diverse and varied the League of Legends color commentary scene would be, where if you want to watch China, you'd have the best one for a start off, the best color commentator. Then if you want to watch international broadcasts that have Chinese teams, like, you know what, IEM Katowice last year had these Chinese teams there. The color commentators I heard at the event were struggling to have any good info about the players and their tendencies and how they would match up. This is somewhere where you could have brought them in and they would plug and play, and instantly they'd have good synergy, they'd have great desk analysis, they could do the games and give you good info. So we could have a proper worlds desk that'd have all the experts on, the best possible knowledge base represented there to translate to us, the viewers, who don't have time to do that or necessarily the interest in the Chinese region, all the best info, all the interesting stuff, and with a knowledge of how to relate it to Westerners, the talent, the delivery, the tone, then synergy to work with other people you don't always have to work with. Someone who has all these talents and isn't being used. And at the moment, it looks to me as though, to a degree, it's kind of being pushed out and held down and repressed a little bit. So to me, that's bullshit. Like, we can have a debate separately about how people present themselves and their persona and what's going to work within a company environment. But as far as I can tell, that's not what's going on here, because again, it's being presented by some people as though like, well, we've just picked the best people for the job. You haven't. I've explained in this video why you definitely have not picked the best people for that job. Or this is someone where actually that, you know, they have some things that are good about them, but they're not actually that good on like a technical level, or maybe this other experience level. Like, you're wrong again and again. Come at me if you're a famous commentator who wants to have a real debate about this, not just make some comment and then just fucking barricade yourself in your toy fort with all fucking pillows, like, I'm not going to say anything to you about that, I said my thing. Like, you have to have a real debate about it, because if you can, I'll destroy you on that, mate. I've got all the info. So in that particular sense, I think this is someone with a lot of talent, and the community, listen, you don't have to like China, you don't have to want to watch China, etc., but you can see from this video, the points I've made, it makes sense that this is someone who should be involved in this sense. And so I think the claim to wanting to be a lead caster for China, or to be an analyst desk someone, if not now, in the future, is entirely valid, it's legitimate, and it also just makes the most sense for us, the audience, and the community in general. The only people I can see that it doesn't make sense for are people who actually should get over themselves and should actually do what's best for the community and for the scenes they claim to want to represent and to service and support. And if they'll do that, then we'll have all these people, and yeah, we can maybe tone some things down, but we'll have the best of what they can be in League of Legends and League of Legends esports in general.